Well, does anybody have any questions or anything? I know I'm jumping into this. Everybody doing good? Okay. So we will get going on this. Okay, so remember, let's just do a little rewind. Okay, so you have the formation stage where you're doing all of this work to create a group, right? All the stuff, and maybe you're even using other people's stuff that they've already, created um, and all the expertise that they put in, like, something like GriefShare, right? So really, if you take something like GriefShare, they have done everything for you, the informed consent, all of that stuff. All you have to do is advertise it, right? And then maybe take calls if you're going to screen or something like that too. But what if you're creating a group that is from scratch and it's from your own mind, and this is something that you want to do? Well, there's probably things out there, like different types of groups that have already been done that you can pull information from. But if you want to, you even make it just your own, it takes a lot of work, right? So you have to do a lot of work in getting everything prepared. And what's it going to look like before it starts, during, and then after? How am I going to make sure that it was successful? During doing surveys, things like that. So we learned all about how to form a group, and that's what your papers will be doing, being on too, is how do I form a group? What's that look like from week to week? Then we learned the initial stage of group, right? So what does that look like? What are the characteristics of the people inside the group, the characteristics of a good leader and a good co-leader? So we learned all of those things too. So in the initial stages of the group, the leaders, co-leader and the leader are probably going to be talking the most at that point, getting everything situated and saying, this is what the group's about. Here are the rules, maybe asking questions and they can give their input on the rules, however you want to handle those things. Then you get into the transition stage, right? So you're transitioning from the initial stage into working, but there's this transition time of them still feeling out the rest of the group. There may be trust that's been built and maybe there hasn't, right? So we are looking to build trust during that time and cohesiveness and collaboration and all of those things. That's where we're moving towards. Then move towards the working stage, right? And that's what we'll learn about next in the next presentation or whatever. But so it's these stages of groups that we want to make sure that we're aware of. And just like, if you're counseling and you're moving somebody through grief, right? There's 5 stages of grief. And you can see those in people are, as you're counseling with them, how they move through stages. Well, in group, it should be the same way. You see how the group moves. Now, each individual may move through those initial stages, transition stages, working at a different pace than each other. But generally, overall, you should see the group enter into. So I'll ask you a question. Can a, can a group move in and out of group stages, like initial, transition, working? Can they move in and out? Are those stages fluid or are they linear?
But if the group is opened, for sure, I think it would be fluid. Like some groups, people like support groups that people come in and out. So you have this new
Yeah.
people like in the initial state.
Okay, let's say it's a closed group. What would
Okay.
that look like? Do you think there would be instances of fluidity in the stages? Or would you say that once they hit working, they stay in working? What are your thoughts?
I don't, I'm going on a limb here because I don't know, but I'm kind of leaning towards they could be fluid because some weeks people just may be tired or
Yeah.
not really feeling it tonight, so they're harder to engage.
Yeah. Yeah. So when a excellent, Cindy, it's perfect. When a group gets into the working stage, and if it's a really cohesive, collaborative, trusting group and everybody's authentic and genuine and all that stuff too, they should be able to stay in that working stage if they've built that trust. But there could be things that happen that may take you back to maybe the transition phase, like a breach of trust or something, right? That may take you back. Okay. So there may be circumstances that happen where we do move in and out. Just like, if you're witnessing somebody in grief, you know, all of the, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, they can move in and out of those stages, right? As an individual. So groups can do the same. Excellent. Okay. So the barometer of trust. Remember, we say trust is one of the most important parts to things to build. It's just like when you are building your therapeutic alliance with your person, even if it's um, counseling individuals, when you're building that therapeutic alliance with them, that's what you're doing is building that trust through authenticity, genuineness, all of those things, right? But you're building that trust to that safe place. Okay. So, how do we measure that? So, when there's a low level of trust, members may do this. I think we went a little bit through this last week, but we'll just do it again. Show up late, leave early, or miss sessions. So when that kind of stuff starts happening, something's going on, right? They're not either not getting something out of it, or there's no cohesion, or there's something that needs to change if you're having those problems, unless it's weather related or something like that. Obviously, if it's weather related or something that you can't control, then that could be something to change. But if it's not anything like that and you're just seeing disinterest in the group, there could be a problem. Okay. Um, when there's low level members may be reluctant to participate due to their fear of being confronted. Hmm. I get that. Maybe they're avoidant. And when the leader starts asking a bunch of questions, ooh, oh, this is a little bit too much for me. I'm not ready for this, right? So they may be avoidant or may not participate. They may be unwilling to initiate personally meaningful work. They're just not ready yet. And that's okay. As long as they keep coming, maybe one time they will, right? And that's what we want in individual counseling too, is um, I was talking to another class and we were talking about when people they call this thing the doorknob confessions. And what that is when you got 5 minutes left, they drop this big bomb on you of maybe trauma or something that's going on in their life. Why do they do that, right? So there's a lot of many reasons that it could be. One, it could be that they promised themselves that they were going to bring up this subject, at our counseling session today. And they go, oh, 5 minutes left. I promised myself. Guess what? Boom, they drop it on you, right? So that happens often, not a whole lot, but it can happen often. But that is something, that you just um, have to watch out for. So they can deny that they have any problems or concerns. Denial is a big thing, right? They can also hide behind global statements and intellectualizations. Man, that's a big word. And they can be unwilling to deal with conflict in the group. So what would be some reasons why they wouldn't want to deal with conflict in the group? Why won't they deal with conflict in the group, people? What would be a list? Go ahead, Erica. Were you gonna say something?
I'm just thinking that
Oh,
many
okay.
people
Gotcha.
avoid conflict in general. They just are conflict of
Mhm.
people that don't like to have conflict. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's not even specifically in the group, but in their lives, they
Yeah.
avoid conflicts.
Yeah. And so maybe that's what we deal with, with them, help them through group counseling is what has happened to you in the past that has made you avoid conflict. So conflict, they could be avoiding it because they don't want to look stupid, or maybe their core beliefs are not where they need to be or should be, and they don't want to be exposed for some reason, any weakness to be exposed. There could be a lot of different reasons why they don't want to deal with conflict in the group. Or it's just their personality. I know my person, I don't like conflict. Who wants who wants conflict, right? But there's good conflict too. If there's productive conflict, that's good, and you do it in such a way that you respect the person. So you can have conflict with people with respect, and then there's progress through that for both of you. Any other thoughts? Okay. Okay, common fears and anxiety. So we'll talk about fear of self-disclosure, fear of them saying anything about themselves, right? So fear of self-disclosure is there's pressure to open up before you are ready. So nobody wants to feel that. Nobody wants to feel the pressure by like maybe another member or group leader or something to open up about something if I'm not ready to address it. So there's this confidence level that people need to have that if they do open up about something, that they are going to be accepted and not rejected, that who they are as their self, right? That's what self-disclosure is, right? That their self is going to be who they are at their core, who they are as a person is going to be accepted by the rest of the group. And if they have any hint of that it wouldn't be, or somebody's going to make fun of them or something like that, they avoid, right? They don't want to um, take that leap of faith, right? So that's what a good leader will help with is establish a group that allows for that safety. So fear of disclosure, members need to feel like they are in charge of what and when to share. So feel in charge that they can share whatever or and whenever they want to, when they're ready, right? They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look X, right? They want it to be a safe place, and they trust all of those around them. I remember myself, um, if I was in a group of people, this is me growing up, I've probably changed since, but me growing up, if I didn't know one person in that group that I was standing around with, I wouldn't say a word. That's just the way I was, right? So that's how group members are too. If they just had that one person in there that they don't trust or haven't had the opportunity to trust, um, they may not share. Okay. So more common fears and anxiety. So fears of being exposed or being vulnerable, right? Yeah. So nobody wants to be, feel that vulnerability unless it is a safe place. And then think about times when you've opened up about something to somebody. How great that feeling was to be vulnerable with that person. How easy it was to open up because what? They had your back. They had you trusted them. Yeah, there's so much that goes into. So common fears and anxiety of being exposed or vulnerable is the fear of ridicule, being shamed by someone. First time that happens in a group, they will never open up again, or it'll take a long time for that to happen. So that's why that transition phase is so important in building that trust and building that safe place. So they may reflect experiences from relationships outside the group. Um, okay, next, fear of being confronted or fear of conflict. We kind of talked about that a little bit before. So fear of losing control of themselves, control of who they are in the group. It says, if I start crying, I may never stop. I won't be able to control myself because maybe this trauma that I've experienced has just been so hard on me that if I start crying, I may never stop, right? That's a fear. So another fear would be I might show the anger I have been hiding. So remember, anger is a secondary emotion. So when anger does happen, we want to investigate that. If somebody becomes angry with something or they use the word anger, we want to investigate that because it's a secondary emotion. But they don't want to show that anger, right? Because it's not who they are at the core. They're being vulnerable. Okay. Here's the big one. We talked about this a little bit earlier, right? Fear of rejection. So afraid of being alone and different within a group. Fear of rejection. So fear of being judged or misunderstood. What if I do say something and in my mind, I understand what I'm saying, but when the way it comes out and the way other people experience it, and maybe it comes out different to them, and they make fun of you, or they talk about you, or whatever it is. So fear of being judged or misunderstood. So common with members who have experienced oppression or discrimination too. So that's where diversity comes in, right? So people who are different from each other or fear that they will be judged or misunderstood. Control issues. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. So group members want to maintain control to lower their anxiety. So in your own lives, if I'm not in control of something, and maybe if it's something major, that anxiety comes up, right? So I always feel I need to be in control. Or just even in control of myself or my emotions, right? So group leaders must remind the group of the group's goals and how control may interfere with these goals. So if I feel I need to always control the situation or something like that, that's going to interfere because maybe when I'm in control of the group or whatever, if I'm one of those controlling type people, then it's changing the dynamics of the group. Okay. Confrontation and conflict. Okay. So for deeper and more honest look at oneself, members must be willing to share what is on their mind, even when it's difficult to say. All right. How are they going to do that? I mean, it has to be a very safe place, right? If they're willing to share what's on their mind and just say it, right? There, there's going to be a lot of testing before that becomes reality, right? Testing the water. So I'm going to try with something so small that and something that doesn't bother me much. I'm going to throw that out there to see how I'm received in it before I drop some big bombs, right? And you have that in individual counseling and group counseling. So unexplored conflict typically shows up in defensive and indirect behaviors. Unexplored conflict typically shows up in defensive and indirect behaviors. So when you see somebody become angry or something like that, that's a defense mechanism, right? So you may know somebody in your life that shows anger because that's how they control things. Like if I can show my anger or whatever, then people may back down or whatever, and then I'm in control of that situation. So defensive,ness, so when so a good leader and a good co-leader are going to watch people for those when those defensive walls come up, right? Or they're not letting people in, or whatever action happens. So you'll get good at, reading people. Like when their behaviors change, then something's going on within them, right? In a negative way. Cohesion grows when conflict is recognized and expressed in a healthy way. Yes. When conflict is recognized and expressed in a healthy way, cohesion grows. Okay. Looks like there's review guidelines for confrontations on page 230. I don't know if it's this book. Remember, sometimes we get into the book. Let's see here. Page 230. Who's confrontation? Okay. So page 238 is where it starts. If you guys are taking notes on that. In our work with groups, we provide members with these guidelines for appropriate and responsible confrontations. So members or leaders know why they are confronting. All right. What are my expectations? If I'm confronting, what are my expectations? What do I want to get out of this, right? Confrontations are not dogmatic statements concerning who or what a person is. The person being confronted is told what effect he or she has on others rather than being labeled, judged, or analyzed. So when this happened, I noticed Sally had a frown on her face, whatever it was. So when you did this, this is how I viewed other people, how they took it. One of the purposes of confrontation is to develop a closer and more genuine relationship with others. So when you can bring up confrontation in a safe manner, and maybe you guys have experienced this in your own life, when you're able to do that in a genuine way and people accept it and work through it with you, trust, even higher trust is built, right? And you're able to do more and more of that as you go. All right, so there's page 238. It has the guidelines of it. Good. Okay, so here's some guidelines. The guidelines for effective confrontation is have a rationale for confronting the person. What is the reason? Confront if you care about the other person. Talk more about yourself than the other person, right? Because if you're talking more about them, they become what? Defensive. They can become defensive, right? If we feel like we're accusing or pointing fingers or something like that. Avoid dogmatic statements. Give others space to reflect on what you say to them. So you give them that time and let them process through that. But you're doing it, and here's the other part is you also have to have watch your helping skills and all of this stuff too. So tone, body language, all of those things are going to be effective in this too. Tone's going to be everything. How you present yourself bodily. Are you closed off? Are you open to them? Are you doing it in a way that is not um, asserting power over them? Things like that. And then group members who pose a challenge for leaders. Here we go. Dealing with difficult behavior of members. So this is one of the important things, right? So you're going to have somebody that's difficult. So avoid responding with sarcasm, right? So if we respond to them with sarcasm, that if you know anything about Gottman, for relationships and stuff like that, there's four horsemen in there. Criticism. This could be sarcasm. It could be part of criticism, right? They may feel criticized, or they may feel like you're making fun of them or something like that if you're not having that honest conversation. So sarcasm is another way to deflect, right? People use humor to deflect, don't they? So that's another thing is we don't want to use sarcasm. Encourage members to explore their defensiveness, right? So if you see a wall go up, we just saw this, right? So we are going to investigate that in a caring manner, right? Why did that wall go up? And it may be something that you get from your past, right? It is a trigger. So if I have a trigger that happens and then my wall goes up and then everybody around me can see it, if we can confront them or challenge them in a way um, to see why that defense mechanism's there, then maybe in a safe environment, then maybe they can process through that and understand the why of it, right? State your observations and hunches in a tentative way. So I'm wondering if, kind of like that type of thing. I'm wondering if, when you did this, I saw that wall go up. I'm wondering if there is some kind of defensiveness going on. Okay. Find ways to explore conflict rather than retreating from it. So meet it head on, right? Avoid personalizing members' reactions. So what that means is avoid saying something back to where they take it personally. All right. So it wasn't a personal thing I just brought up. It was a matter of a fact thing so that you can process through that and so that you can see what was going on. And maybe people have this defensiveness comes up and they don't even know it because it's happened so many times in their life. Okay, let's see here. Automatic styles of I think it says automatic. I've got this thing above it. Styles of behaving in a group. This says. What's that say up top?
It says problematic.
Oh, problematic. Okay, cool. Sorry. I've got this thing over the top of it, and so I can't see it. Okay, problematic styles of behaving in a group. Silence. That's kind of funny too, because as a counselor, we need to get comfortable with silence, don't we? Silence isn't always good, right? Problematic styles of behaving in a group, being silent. So if a person is sitting there being silent all the time, what happens to the other members in the group? That trust is gone. If everybody's sharing and then there's that one person I'm sitting that back there going, man, are they judging me? Saying, all those things. So I might feel judged or something like that if somebody's always silent. Um, Somebody who is monopolizing in the group, monopolizing the time and conversation and all of that. That's a problem. Storytelling, questioning everything. When somebody questions something, how do you feel about that? It's like a lot of times it's like you can feel criticized sometimes when they keep questioning things, right? So it's all in the way you question, and right then it's like how often you question too. Giving advice, yeah. People are masters of their own person, right? And so sometimes they don't want to be given advice unless they ask for it, right? Dependency, offering pseudo support, hostile behavior, absolutely. Acting superior above everyone. Socializing, because if we're socializing, we're not getting down to business, right? We're treating it as a social group and not a work group. So guess what? You'll never get into the working stage if all we do is socialize, okay? Intellectualizing and members becoming assistant leaders. Yeah, I don't want that. Okay. Dealing with defensive behaviors. So many interventions can facilitate working with challenging group members rather than fighting them. So this book is going to give you a lot of those things to help when you're in, even if you um, read more books on group counseling or whatever, but also maybe even Google things, go out and find scripts that people use. So many interventions can facilitate working with challenging group members rather than fighting with them. So if you have scripts prepared saying, hey, I noticed when this happens, you do this, maybe it's like you even say, part of our rules say that you can't say this type of thing, whatever it is. Leaders' responses should provide encouragement for members to say more than stopping at the point of initial resistance. Questions should be open-ended and presented in an invitational manner. Open-ended. So you are promoting dialogue, right? We want dialogue to happen. So we're going to use open-ended questions, not closed. And we're going to invite them. I'm wondering if, and then an open-ended question. What are your thoughts? So you're inviting them um, to include their thoughts. Okay. Dealing with avoidance by the whole group. Dealing with avoidance by the whole group. Isn't that a scary thought? If you have, um, you're doing a group and everybody's avoiding or not talking and they're silent and so on and so forth, right? So when an entire group chooses not to work and is unwilling to deal with several hidden agendas, it's important to do the following, okay? Address what is going on. You have to. You have to bring it up. Address what is going on. And as who here watches the Andy Griffith Show? Better see some hands.
I watched a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So what's Barney Fife say? Nip it in the bud.
Yes.
He says nip it, right? So what he's meaning there is you're addressing it, addressing the problem and getting it taken care of in a fast manner so we can move to the next thing. Bring to the surface the hidden agendas. Refuse to give up. Yeah, don't let whatever it is dominate your group, right? Not indulge in feelings of frustration and annoyance. Woo! Man, I am so guilty of that. I am so guilty of when things aren't going right or whatever. I have feelings of frustration and annoyance, and it shows. I know that. I know that about myself. So I have to be really, really careful not to be frustrated or show it at least. You're going to be frustrated, you know, just don't take it personally. Anybody have thoughts on that? Okay. All right. I want to open this up for a second. So I know we've talked about this before and in other classes too, but what is transference and what is countertransference? What's transference?
Is it when the client identifies with the counselor on issues?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I guess it says it right there too, doesn't it? Yeah. So yes, absolutely, Susan. Good job. So transference is what the feelings that clients project onto the counselor, and it's a good thing if it's productive, right? So that means that you are getting down to something where if they're projecting, these feelings of transference onto you, they are working through those emotions and they're working through those feelings and behaviors and all of those things. So it's a good thing if you make it productive, right? So feelings clients project onto the counselor, which are rooted in the member's past relationships. Good. Countertransference, when counselors project their own unresolved conflicts onto the client, that can be damaging to members, right? If we have not dealt with the issues within and we have somebody that comes in and they remind us of the trigger that we had, we can have that countertransference and it can be very, very unproductive, right? So you're going to have it. That's okay. So just knowing that, being aware of it, and go work on it, right, with your own counselor or whatever, a supervisor or whatever. I'm forever, something may come up with people that I'm supervising, and we work through that. I mean, that's just one thing that you can do. A group context has the potential for multiple transferences. So those feelings can be explored so members become aware of how they keep old patterns functional in present relationships. So think about this. Think about romantic relationships, right? Think about um, when you've had, people in your past that you dated or whatever it was, and they gave you some sort of feeling. Then you get into the new relationship and this new relationship gives you that same feeling, but they may not know that they're doing it for one, or may not have been doing it on purpose or whatever, where the first person may have been manipulative or controlling or whatever, and this person gives you that feeling of that, but they're not trying to do it on purpose or whatever, then that's where there's that transference, right? So you need to get that work through, right? And as a couple or friends or whatever, it didn't have to be a romantic relationship, being able to have those dialogues with each other. Healthy relationship dialogues. Okay. What's that say at the top?
Co-leader issues.
Ah, co-leader issues in the transition stage. Negative reactions towards one leader can happen. Challenges to both leaders, dealing with problem behaviors and dealing with counter transference. So you can have all of these negative type issues happen within the transition stage. Hopefully, we're getting rid of all of these so that we can move to the working stage. So once you get to the working stage, these should be minimal. They can still happen, and you'll have an easier time of taking care of them, but just noticing them up front, dealing with them so that we can. Our goal is to always work towards the working stage, always, unless we're working towards the final stage. But we're always working towards getting into the working stage because that's where the meat happens, right? Okay, so member functions in the transition stage, okay? So this is what is up for all of the members, okay? So recognize, this is what they're doing, recognize and express persistent reactions. Unexpressed feelings may contribute to a climate of distrust. So if you see somebody sitting there and they're giving this nonverbal body language to somebody who's talking and they've just disclosed something and they give this nonverbal body language that of disgust or something like that. So you're recognizing that they just expressed an issue, right? And if we don't talk about those things, then the person who may be looking at the person and there's that offensive whatever, the distrust can come, and then that person who just disclosed something may never disclose again if we don't create that safe place. Does that make sense? Okay. Respect their own defenses, but work with them. So I understand my own defenses and I am going to work through these things, right? I'm going to process through them. And I know they're there and I know that it may hold me back in some reason, way or fashion, but I am going to work through them. When we want them to move from dependence to independence, so not depending on others, not depending on a leader, but depending on themselves, that's the independence or interdependence. Learn how to comfort others in a constructive manner. Yeah. And just kind of think, what does that look like? How does comforting others in a constructive manner look like? Right? Active listening, empathy, things like that, right? Being authentic, genuine, all of those things. Work through conflicts rather than remaining silent or forming subgroups outside of sessions. So look at this thing, right? You've all seen this, guaranteed. So if you're not working through a conflict within a group, maybe it's at your job or whatever, and then you see other people, they take that and then they go gossip. What happens, right? There's mistrust happens, right? So they'll never, so we can't have any talk outside of the sessions and not even with other group members. That's not productive at all. We want it all to be in this group. So leader functions during this stage. We want to teach members the value of dealing fully with conflict. If any conflict arises, we want to what? Barney Fife it, nip it in the bud, right? Any kind of, that's two references to Barney Fife that I've had. So assist members in recognizing their own defensive patterns. So if something comes up, oh, I get this wall that comes up when somebody breathes funny or whatever, I get this defensive, posture about me. So I want to recognize that and know that that happens. And I want to work on that. Teach members to respect anxiety and defensiveness defensive behaviors and to work constructively with attempts at self-protection. So think about self-protection, what that is. So I'm protecting myself from danger of some sort, right? So I have defenses that come up or walls or whatever, to protect myself. So I know when this wall comes up, that's when I want to have self-disclosure to say, hey, when you just said that, I felt this trigger and I really need to work through that. And you can work through that with others. Leaders model how to deal directly and tactfully with any challenge. That's the best part. If you can model the healthy person in the group, then they become that too. Encourage members to express reactions that pertain to the here and now happenings in the session. What just came up for you? When Bob said this, what just came up for you? I noticed there was a trigger that happened in you. What came up for you? Or, I was angry. I was hurt. I was sad. I was whatever I was. You want to help them express those emotions right now. Okay. The leader also encourages members to continually say aloud what they are thinking and feeling in a group. Describe what you're observing. So, John, I noticed you became quiet when Sally raised her voice. What is happening in you right now? Oh, when Sally raised her voice, it reminded me of my mother. She has the same voice tone as my mother, then. And so it made me draw within and I became, defensive or I became whatever, right? It scared me. Describe how it impacts you as a leader. So, John, when you're quiet, it saddens me because I think you have a lot of important things to share with others. It saddens me that you don't open up, you know? So then that gives you ways of talking through things that you notice with them. And if you're noticing it, other people are noticing it too. So a leader identifies areas of mistrust. I noticed that the group is focusing mostly on stories outside of the group. So that means there's not, that if they're talking about all this stuff that's going on outside those walls, we're not talking about what's going on inside the wall, right? So there could be a lack of trust, right? So that's one way of looking at it. I'm wondering if the group doesn't trust each other enough to be more vulnerable about their experiences with each other. We want to validate fears, validate their emotions, right? I know this is scary for you as a group to experience conflict, but it seems like you're afraid to hurt other people, and that's why we're not experiencing that. So I get it. I was afraid too when I was in your position. I'd be afraid too if you had these triggers, whatever it is. Encourage members also, so it would look like this. John, I noticed when you started talking about your emotional reaction to Sarah, you stopped. Please continue. Your feelings are very important. So why did they stop? Maybe they didn't want to offend Sarah. Maybe maybe they even thought, wow, I'm noticing something within me. I'm saying this out of anger or something like that. So what do they notice about that? And you want to encourage them to continue. Okay. Another one down. So chapter 8. Okay, so now we're getting to it, right? So this is the working stage of group. Oh. Can you guys see chapter 8?
Nope. 7.
Okay, so it says something happened here. Here, let me get to A here. Sorry about that. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. Here we
Are you
go.
going to upload the slides on Canvas,
Say what?
Doug, later? Are
Oh,
you going to upload the
yeah,
slides on
actually,
Canvas?
they're out there. Thanks for asking. So if you go out to Canvas and it says updated presentations, that's where they're all at.
Updated, okay. I went in files, but it's not exactly this one. It looked that is an older version.
Yeah. So if you go into updated presentations at the bottom, it should be the second
Okay.
from the bottom.
Updated presentation.
Yeah. These
Okay.
beautiful ones are out there. The other ones are ugly. So we had an assistant this year that went out and made them all beautiful. And so she kept the old ones just in case we needed them. But yeah, these.
Okay,
So thanks for asking. I appreciate you asking that. Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, chapter 8. This is the working stage. Oh, so we're right where we want to be. Working stage. So learning objectives, we want to describe the dynamics associated with group processes in the development, demonstrate various leader interventions for exploring the members' fears at various stages of the group. That's what we've been doing, right? So what's it look like in the working stage? Identify and define the key characteristics of group during the working stage. Highlight the differences between working group and a non-working group. So when we're not, so we get into the working stage, what's that look like? If we're not in it, what's that look like? We should be, or maybe we've been in it before and we get out of it and we go back to transition. So what's that look like? Identify ethical and culturally relevant strategies, and then become familiar with choices to be made during the working stage. Both you, the group, co-leaders, and so on. Discuss the specific therapeutic factors and how they contribute to the group effectiveness. Present guidelines, which we kind of went through in transition. So what do the guidelines look like in the working stage? Describe guidelines for giving and receiving feedback, for self-disclosure, and so on. And then identify co-leader issues at the working stage. So what's it look like? What's a leader do? What's a co-leader do? And what are the roles look like? Okay. So we kind of talked about this a little bit. Remember, I asked you, are group stages fluid? So there are no arbitrary dividing lines between each phase. So that's what makes it kind of tough sometimes to recognize what stage we're in. But as you run more and more groups, you'll understand what to look for. Group development ebbs and flows, does not stay static. Work can occur at every stage, not just the working stage. Yeah, absolutely. Not all groups reach working stage. Yeah, I'm trying to think. What would be an example of a group that doesn't reach working stage? Trying to think of does Alcoholics Anonymous always stay in the working stage, or is it always in the transition stage? Things like that. Okay. Not all members function at the same level in a working stage. So that's the one thing, is we want to get everybody to that working stage all at the same time. That would be perfect world. But it's not always going to happen that way. So progressing to the working stage. So to reach working stage, members must make commitment to face and work through barriers that interfere with the group's progress. So if something comes up inside the group, just think about when you're moving into the working stage, it's going to be a lot tougher. It's going to take a lot longer to get to the point where you are just able to take conflict or whatever happens and process through it, get to the other side of it, and move on to the next thing. So some of the reasons why is because we haven't developed 100% trust yet. So there's distrust in there. We haven't done all the things necessary to learn how to do something, how to process through something, how to look for our own defensiveness, how to process triggers, things like that, right? But once we get those skills under our belt and everybody gets those skills, the time of working through and processing in the working stage should be get smaller and smaller and smaller because we're getting so good at it, right? And they should be working on it outside of the room too, right? Meaningful work and learning occur at every stage of a group. However, deeper exploration and an increased level of group cohesion are typical of the working stage of the group. So that's how you notice you're in there. You're in the working stage. It's because people are exploring more and they're talking about their own triggers or defensiveness or other people's triggers or defensiveness. If I see a wall go up on somebody and say, "Oh, I noticed, Bob, that when I said this, a wall came up. Tell me more about that. I didn't mean to offend or whatever it is. Tell me more about that so that I can understand how my actions created your reactions." Okay, leader interventions in working with a member's fears. Okay. So, interventions at each stage. Okay. So, in the initial stage, when we first start off within the group, interventions are aimed at providing encouragement, right? So, we're always encouraging each other to work through something, to process something, to talk, to be vulnerable, to do all of these things. We're always encouraging them to be vulnerable. Okay. So in the transition phase, interventions demand more from the members than at the initial stage. So it's a lot of the same, but we're diving deeper and we're holding them more accountable to things too in the transition stage. So we may, when we get to the transition stage, start processing on a single item. And when we do that, processing through that, we may stick with it longer and not let them out of it. See what I'm saying? So much until we we resolve it. In the working stage, what an intervention looks like is it involves the entire group and in the members' personal work. So we're working on Bob, and Bob has this trigger that every time Sarah says something, it reminds him of his mother. Chastising him or whatever. So the whole group is going to help Bob through that. That's the working stage. Then the final stage, encourage members to see how the changes practiced in the group might affect significant people in their life. So that's where we say in the final stage, the inside the group, these 8 people that you're working with, is a smaller picture of the outside world. So we want to create a safe environment world in the group so that you can practice things. So what's that going to look like on the outside of those walls when you go practice it? So I encourage members to see how the changes practiced in this group, what you just did in that intervention that you did, how do you see that working when you get outside of these walls? And maybe you're even choosing somebody that when you are on outside of the walls, you're choosing somebody that you're going to practice this with. And so how do you see this working out with them? right? So that you're always starting with the end in mind. And how does what you're going to do on the outside, how do you see that going? And if it doesn't work out the way they do, that's okay. You bring it back the next week and say, hey, I tried this. Okay, what came up for you? So you just keep reprocessing through these things so that they become stronger every time that you process through it. It's encouragement, okay? Tasks of the working stage, okay? So group norms and behaviors. What does the normalcy of the group look like, right? So, and what does the behavior look like in it? So both support and challenge to take risks in the group. So we're always looking for support and to challenge people to take risks in the group. That should be a norm, and that should be the behavior that is being portrayed. So another norm and behavior should be use of variety of therapeutic interventions. So not just one, we're going to be use many, and because one may work with one may not work with the other, the same one, and a different one may work, right? So then we're also giving them the person different tools to use. So when they are working on something out there, if one thing's not working, they may try another thing, right? That may help. Okay. More direct. So in the working stage, there should be more direct interactions between the members. It's not between the members and the leader anymore. It should be they're working with each other through that. So remember, I told you the dynamics of the leader. Once you get into the working stage, you should be pulled back and they should be working on the issues, right? So you're just facilitating, you're just leading, you're just directing, you're just driving, right? So they're the ones doing the work with each other. So healing capacity within the group develops. So they're all this will be the beautiful part of it. Once you get to this part where they're healing and they're healing with one another, watch the cohesion skyrocket during this time. And if they're all doing it together, it's beautiful. Increased group cohesion fosters action-oriented behavior. So if I'm working with the rest of the group and I'm getting encouraged and I process through something, and once I reach the other end and I've got this intervention and these tools to be able to try it outside of the group, that's where the group, the better the group cohesion, the more vulnerable I can be, right? The more confident I can be on the outside because I've worked through with these people and I've been encouraged the whole way and they've been authentic and they've told me more about myself. Okay. So we're still under tasks of the working stage, so characteristics of a working stage. So we just learned about the norms of a group and the behavior, and now we're looking at what are the characteristics? What does a working group look like? So trust is increased and there is a sense of safety. Man, if you get that at whatever percentage, a high percentage, 100%, whatever, watch out. Cohesiveness, all the stuff, it's going to be a beautiful thing. And you, as the leader, you can just sit back and watch it because they're doing all the work then. You're just facilitating. Members' goals are clear and they're specific, right? So what's the best way to measure something? You create SMART goals, right? Something specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and then time sensitive, right? So that's what these goals are. They're measurable. So focus is on the here and now, not the past. The focus is on the here and now. What's going on inside of me, the here and now, not what I've felt in the past, but what I'm feeling right now while I'm trying these new interventions. Members are willing to make themselves what? Known. They're willing to make themselves known in front of each other. So cohesion is high. There's a sense of emotional bonding in there. Think about, oh, here's the last one. Conflict in the group is recognized and explored. So think about a group, here, let me stop sharing for a second. So think about a group that you've been a part of in the past. Um, I was a part of this young man's group a long time ago when I was 13 or whatever, and I went away to Colorado, and it was like a basketball camp. You did more than just basketball. You related with one another. You opened up about things. So it was a growth experience too. But what they were teaching is that's what what team members, even in sports, should be doing is growing with one another and having that cohesion. And then you have a better team. So think about in your past when you've been a part of a team or group counseling or a group or family, whatever it is, and you've experienced all those things that we just went through. Think about a time. So I just kind of gave an example of mine. Does anybody have an example of when you have gotten to this point where you had so much cohesion, you had so much trust, you had so much um, you had so much of all of that stuff that you were able to process and be vulnerable with people. Anybody want to share time?
I feel like my community group in college was kind of like that.
Yeah.
Like I felt like people were like really honest and open about like how the week was and what they're going through. And then there was also like one of the slides was talking about like a greater sense of like members holding each other accountable. And I
Oh
felt
yeah.
like there was that too, where like checking in on stuff that people brought up last week and stuff like that, like really being devoted to other people's growth too.
Oh, Jolie, that's good. I love that last part that you added about the accountability. Oh, that's so good. Yes. Holding each other accountable in such a safe way, challenging and things like that too. But that just promotes growth. Oh, I love that. Good job. Yeah, Erica.
I think for me was probably the best group was at BSF, Bible Study Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the staff, so we have like teaching leaders, substitute teaching leader, and leader of the children's ministry. So we're six over 200 women.
Yes.
So we met every week, and we had like prayer time, we have Bible study time, we have leaders training just for us, and then we are like replicating this for the big group. But we were really tight, and all the conflicts that we had in all the areas with all the women and volunteers, we had to kind of pray and have a solution. So we were in tune, we were always praying for all those women and trying to solve the conflict in a biblical way, but we needed to be really tight and support each other and be vulnerable with our weaknesses too. So it was a really good team.
That is awesome. Yeah. I love the aspect of being able to bring prayer into it and um, just knowing that others are praying for you helps your confidence and encouragement and stuff too. I love that.
And praying together bring such an intimacy, because we would pray
Yes.
for personal things and for the ministry, but we were really,
I love that because you're seeing what's on the mind of the person too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good. I love that. Who else?
I think for me, we went on a missions trip, as a church group, and I think that was really because we had like unity and purpose. We had a connected purpose to fulfill, share the gospel with people.
Mhm.
And just leadership was also they were servant-hearted, just setting the model for how we're supposed to go about communication with non-believers and uh,
Mm.
how do you build that trust and connection right away with someone, even though you just met them. So like, yeah, we had that dependence on each other, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
But don't you think, and maybe this is with Jolie's and Erica's as well, that you all had kind of the same, you were pursuing the same goal, and once that helps the cohesion too, right? Is because we're all driving towards the same thing, and that's what, churches are different, but uh, we should all be having the same goal is to reach others for Christ, right? So anyway, that's good. Who else has an example?
I was just gonna say my region group, when I went through region, we started out with horrible cohesion. We were not
Ooh,
very cohesive at all. We started out with like 12, maybe 14, because I think we were one of the first rounds after the group of leaders went through. And I felt like it was kind of bad, our original cohesion. And then once we kind of pared down, and I think it's like what you said, Doug, like the ones who didn't end up aligning with the others in the group on what the goal of being there was,
yeah,
they ended up just kind of falling away. And then the last of us who kind of lasted step 4 and beyond, since we were all focused on the same thing with the same goal,
yeah.
graduated with 6 of us, right? So like half of the people left. And I think that that's just an interesting thing. And by the time we were done, it was tight. Like I still talk to those ladies all the time and get
Yeah.
coffee with them and text with them and pray with them and stuff like that. But then the other 6, some of them I don't even remember the names of, if I'm honest.
Okay, that's Maddie, that's so awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is once we got, I'm going to say this in a nice way. Once the people were vetted out, that weren't ready to do the work,
Hmm.
and we got down to the core of people, and we were all moving in the same direction. See how fast it went to
Hmm.
how that cohesion and trust and all that stuff was built, and then you just have it, right?
Hmm.
But when you have individuals in the group where they're not there for the same reasons or things like that too, it takes that trust away. And
Hmm.
guess what? People don't talk. Yeah,
Sure.
there's a lot of silence. So see, um, all the stuff that we're just kind of learning in there, you saw that firsthand in the group.
Yeah. And like a lot of the problematic behaviors that we went over and
Yeah.
that are in that list of problematic behaviors during the transitional stage, like those are the kinds of people, for lack of a better word, that kind of fell off. You
Yeah.
know, ones who were monopolizing the time and trying to do nothing but give advice and acting superior or hostile or overly socializing. They were the ones that ended up kind of falling away
Yeah.
um, naturally too, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. Think about think about a work environment too. Like if you guys ever been part of a team of workers or whatever, and then you have people there that just socialize too much, they talk too much and all that stuff. What's that do for morale? You know what I mean? If you have tasks to do and then you have timelines on those, but you have some people who are working hard and then you have other people who aren't, what happens to the morale in that type of atmosphere too? Yeah, man, Maddie, that was awesome. Good job. That's a great example. All these were good examples. Yeah. Anybody else have one? How about you, Ben? Down there. Okay, so it is 7:20. We're going to start again at 7:30. So let's take a 10-minute break. Is that good? Okay, and then we'll come back at 7:29 so I can put you in your groups. Okay. See you in 9 minutes. Okay.